space diplomacy and policy analyst, space strategy consultant. Currently, he is associated with RIS, that is Research and Information System for Developing Countries. It's Government of India organization, and he has been writing a lot of on this subject through his blogs, and he has been participating in many talks and seminar series. Recent being Indian Space Congress, he was one of the eminent speakers on the dais, sharing the dais with who's and who's of the industry. So that topic was including, of course, of Gaganyaan as well as the India Space Station with the target 2030. So this is a very new and very vast subject for us. So I request you to take it over from here and enlighten us on this.
So the topic of my today's talk is India in the second space age of interplanetary connectivity. Now, it may sound a mouthful. It's really a long topic, but there are elements of it which we are trying to understand in bits and pieces. The first element of it is what is India's role in the coming second space age, and I'll explain over here why am I calling it the second space age, why not the first space age, and that means whether the first space age is over and we are entering into a new phase of space exploration and space activities. And what do I mean by interplanetary connectivity? Now, we've heard about transnational connectivity, infrastructure. We've heard about telecom connectivity, public infra, road and rail. But this is something new, and it is also starting to make sense because there is a concerted effort happening around globally to create a network between the Earth and the Moon, which is called the Cislunar Connectivity Project, as well as Earth and Mars. They are all right now in the early stages of concept and conceptualization, but eventually in the next 20-30 years, things are going to progress tremendous. And India is going to have a very big role in it because being the third largest economy on the planet, we will have the necessary means, we have wherewithal, we have the people, the talented work pool in the country to make it happen. We are going to do very well in this domain. But before doing very well in it, we must understand what is the future up to. So in this talk, I'll be talking about mostly about politics of space, on the economics of space, and the militarization of space. All the three aspects are inevitable. No, none of it can be avoided, and we'll have to live with it. But in the scheme of things, I believe astropolitics is at the apex. It is the politics that you want to achieve in outer space. Just like the way you achieve here on Earth, which we call as geopolitics, is going to matter a lot. Below the politics, slightly below the politics, is the economics of space activities. You are going to be able to make a political impact in space only if you have economic heft in your own country as well as economic heft in outer space. So that is, again, an important factor which is coming up quite rapidly. And the third factor is how to preserve your interest, how to preserve your national interest in outer space. And that means national interests are no more confined to your own territory. National interest is no more confined to, your assets in other countries, but it is also extending to assets in outer space. So again, those sort of goals will matter a lot. I'll also talk about the US-China space race, the dependencies that they are creating, and there is this massive way of violent mergers and acquisitions which is happening. We must keep an eye on that. So when I say the second space age, I'm actually saying that the first space age is over, and the first space age was concomitant. It was simultaneous with the third industrial age, the third industrial revolution. So let's go back to the time when India got independent. So in the 1940s. 1940s was the time when the World War was reaching its apex. After that, 1940s was again the same period when many of the technologies of the later years came into culmination. Now you call it atomic fission, you call fertilizers like urea, antibiotics like penicillin, commercial automobiles that were made on a massive scale, and long-range air travel. All of it became possible during that. Then immediately after the end of the war, there was another quite faster evolution of technologies when semiconductors came to the fore, plastics came to the fore, computers came to the fore, and the recombinant DNA technology. All of this happened in the 1960s. And it was again concomitant with the Sputnik movement. Sputnik movement happened in the 1957, and most of these innovations in semiconductors, plastics, all of it happened around the same time. So the technologies that took humans to the moon, the technologies that led the Gemini program in the US, or the Luna missions, the Mercury missions, all were made possible because of these new materials: semiconductors, plastics, computers, recombinant DNA technology to an extent. But that was a 40 to 60 year round, long cycle. And something started changing in the last decade. in the 2010. Because of increasing emphasis on cyber physical systems, there is again a vast global preparation for moving away from fossil fuel towards more cleaner fuels. There is great emphasis on mechatronics, and JanyuTech is at the heart of it. And of course, genetic modification, CRISPR, as we know it. So all of these technologies are giving out signs that the fourth industrial revolution has begun to happen, and its effects will start to show up in this decade of 2020. But that also means that there will be another round of space age coming, and that's why I'm calling it the second space age. That the first space age was over. It was over when the likes of Elon Musk, the likes of Blue Origin came to the fore, when Americans wholeheartedly took up commercialization of their space activities, especially by commercializing launch services, commercializing, building up of space station modules for the next for the successor of the ISS, and many other activities. Also, commercialization of lunar exploration. So this trend of commercialization is something that we also caught up in 2020 when the space sector reforms happened. But I'll talk about it a few slides later. So what is going to happen in the next 2 decades or so? And I've had great discussions on this with Amrish. Amrish has a great view of what is going to happen in 2020, in the 2020s and 2030s. So there will be another round of quick technology evolution when fusion will become a reality. Human robotic interface will again become a reality. There will be incessant situational awareness because of your Internet of Things, and long duration space habitation, long duration space travel will become possible. So all of this is going to happen in the 2030s and 2040s. So that also means that the technologies that were created during Space 1.0 are going to experience some changes. So if you look at the traditional Space 1.0, what you see is there are two domains quite clear. The governments and the governmental space agencies have had a stronghold over space activities, and where the commercial players were more or less vendors. They were not party to the innovation, or not party to the activities per se directly. So they were dependent largely on government for finance. So navigation satellites that we see, the GPS, LONAS, even here in India, the NAVIC system, all have come out from governmental funding. Space science, our Chandrayaan missions or the American Apollo mission came out of government funds. Let me tell you that the American Apollo mission was extremely costly. It took up nearly 4% of their GDP at that point in time, 1966, 1967, to make whatever has happened happen. So 4% of GDP is a lot. So the government was ready to spend it. At that point in time, they spent it, and later they retreated from those kind of exorbitant spendings. Military, of course, is the cornerstone of any space activities, and space, as we all know, is primarily a military domain, and everything follows that. Earth observation activities, human spaceflight, again, government. So what was the commercial sector doing? The commercial sector was largely contributing to orbital launches, especially in the West. They were heavily part of the communication systems, mobile and fixed satellite services. And even in the past, there were some players, especially the American players, those who were part of low Earth orbit communication satellite systems. Okay, so this was the landscape during the traditional Space 1.0. What's happening right now in 2.0 is that you see a basket of 3 different types of technologies. One basket is that of mature technology, one is the basket of maturing technology, and then there are nascent technologies which are yet to be tested. So downstream services, especially geoinformatics, geospatial data services, manufacturing of small sat subsystems, components, IoT, media, internet for all services, all of this are right now mature. They will eventually get deployed once 6G telecom comes into the play. And apart from that, small satellite launch systems. We've heard this recent news about Agnikul and Skyroot. They will be having their launches in the next few days and months. Skyroot will have it on November 15th if all goes in their favor, and Agnikul will follow after that. So again, small satellite launches is a commercial system entirely, and it is a mature system. Space station servicing is again a mature system. We've seen that in the case of ISS. You will eventually see that in the case of the subsequent space stations that are coming up, especially Axiom Space, which is raising the world's first commercial space station. Again, private sector rules the roost there. And tourism, space tourism. Now, when I say tourism, it doesn't mean that these are activities only for leisure. These are also activities, space tourism activities are also commercial in nature. It will be more or less business tourism. So business tourism is going to increase that because people interested in manufacturing or testing their technologies in microgravity, they will become the tourists. Then there is a maturing set of technologies, which is debris mitigation. Space debris is going to become a major problem, and its mitigation and removal is again a commercial enterprise. And there are private sector players all over the world who are testing their technology at this moment. Satellite servicing, microgravity manufacturing, again, are going to come up in this 7 to 8 years, and that's not a long period. Eventually, once we land on the moon, once we stay there on the moon, space resource extraction of hydrogen and oxygen, extraction of helium-3, and all the valuable materials and minerals and fuels will become a commercial activity. But that is still a few years away from us. And of course, for that to happen, you need space habitats, robust space habitats. Again, that is yet to happen, but the plans have been put in place. Another crux of the second space age is sustainable activities in outer space. Now, there has been a time when only a few hundred of satellites were orbiting in outer space. Most of these were American, some of these were European, but that is it. Even today, India does not have more than 60 satellites orbiting. But with the rise of low Earth orbit constellations and constellations like Starlink or constellations like Kuiper, constellations like OneWeb, all these companies are promising, or even the Chinese Galaxy I Space, they all are promising constellations consisting of around 10,000 satellites. Now, that is a massive number in the LEO. And what does that do? That increases the chances of creation of space debris, and it jeopardizes a lot of activities in outer space. So for that, there is again a massive movement happening for sustainable activities in outer space. That means making sure that debris is not created, making sure that you're not taking into outer space not so clean fuels, that you're emphasizing on the use of clean fuels, clean propulsion. So it could be cryogenic here on Earth, it could be liquid oxygen, liquid methane, LOX, and all those kind of fuels, or electric propulsion, ion propulsion in outer space. So there is this French government has come up with a platform for policy discussion known as Paris Peace Forum, and Paris Peace Forum has taken this sort of initiative. And what they have done is they have been successful in gathering numerous companies who are committing to carrying out sustainable activities. So, for example, there are companies like Viasat, which is a big player in the Satcom, Spaceable, Calmoris, Darkstar, Plus Space Systems. They are all saying that they will commit their activities to space situational awareness, and they will quantitatively evaluate the near space, the LEO environment continuously. Then there are companies like Changguan, which is a Chinese company, GMB, Scout, Share My Space. They've said that we'll focus on space debris detection, autonomous satellite navigation, so that the satellites do not, the satellites can deflect away from an incoming collision. Then companies, even our Indian company Skyroot, has committed to clean launch vehicle fuels, reusability of rocket systems, high fidelity space-based services, so on and so forth. There's a lot happening. So eventually, this will become a pressure group for the global private sector, because if you are able to carry out activities in a responsible manner, chances are that your companies are going to get international finances. If you are an irresponsible player, chances are you don't get access to the international finance mechanism. So this is the leverage, this is the bait that is being thrown at. And I think our Indian startups, our Indian companies should take this bait, because we don't have heritage systems. Many of our space companies are extremely new, so they don't have to compromise on anything. So for them, the blackboard is quite clean, squeaky clean. You can write whatever you want to write. You don't have to rub it. So this is an opportunity that our Indian players, private players, should take up. Then there is a political push for cleaning up the space launch industry globally. ISRO has come up with a design which they call Admire, and it focuses on lower stage reusability. So they want to use the lower stage, reuse the lower stage again and again. So again, agencies like ISRO, companies like SpaceX, they are responding to this political push. Then upper stage reusability is something that we are already demonstrating. The RLV-TD demonstration of 2016 India Space Shuttle is focusing on that. Then there is again a focus, like I said, on clean lower stage fuels. Methaloc is one. There are attempts being made for alcohol air mixtures, carbon dioxide fuels, and whatnot. So there is a political emphasis on that because you don't want to be using the hydrazine that we've been using for the past 60 years. People want to move on to cleaner fuels because rocket launches are also going to become quite frequent and frequent to a scale that we may have in the next 2 decades or so, at least 2 to 3 weekly launches from any of the spaceports in the world. So a lot of space traffic, and that means emphasis on cleaner fuels. Many of the countries have set up dedicated military space units. Starting with Americans, they established the US Space Force, which made news tremendously all over the world. Renamed their Russian aerospace forces into Russian Space Forces. Not so long ago, PLA, People's Liberation Army of China, they established something known as PLA Strategic Support Forces. And within their strategic support forces, they have two departments. One is a department entirely dedicated to cyber systems, network systems, and one is a department dedicated to space systems. And they are not distinguishing between the two. Both these departments have been placed at an equal pedestal. The Germans came up with Cyber and Information Domain Service Headquarters. The French have come up with French Air and Space Forces. The Japanese established Space Operations Squadron in 2020. And we here in India, we established the Defense Space Agency under the auspices of the Chief of Defense Staff, the CDS. So are there space activities of these military units confined only to the Earth orbits? Are they only looking at the Earth? Is terrestrial security their only goal? No, that is not the case. And it is good for us that the Americans are taking lead over here, because let them be the pioneers and let them bear the advantages as well as the massive disadvantages of being pioneers. So what they've done is their Air Force Research Laboratory has come up with a system of satellites that they will place between the Earth and the Moon, and they call it as the Cislunar Highway Patrol System. So what this will do is they will have a satellite placed somewhere close to the Moon. Some of these where the field of view would be much wider, but it won't travel a distance. It will be wide, but the cone will be short. And another set of satellites within the same system will do a narrow field detection, but a long range detection. Why are they doing this? Because they want to see who all reaches the moon before they do. Okay, so they are setting up this patrol. They want to see whether there is any unannounced Chinese space launch or even Indian space launch. Why, for that matter, leave us from that position. They want to make sure that all these unannounced satellites don't reach the moon and can in their approach to being on the moon. So being on the moon is not going to be... The French also have their perception of what sort of menaces do they, but they see a lot of threats coming out of directed energy weapons, threats to their SATCOM by telemetry jamming, robotic mating, mechanical docking, kinetic collision, and so on and so forth. This year, when the Russia-Ukraine conflict began, so as you all know, when we were all sitting in our homes during the first lockdown in the month of May 2020, the Indian government carried out major space reforms, something that was waiting to happen for a very long time. And since not a lot of space activities were happening in reality, it was really wise of the government, it was really wise of the Department of Space to carry out this long pending reforms. So the reforms was nothing but facilitate the private sector more and more, give them access to the infrastructure they need, make them party to innovation, make them party to exploration, participate with them in creating new commercial spin-offs, and help them in as many ways as possible. Okay. I won't go into the details. And in all this, the Department of Space created two new agencies. One is known as the Indian National Space Promotion and Authorization Center, which is working more on offering space companies the necessary access to infrastructure. And NSIL is working on the supply side, where it is generating spin-offs and it is providing a lot of services that ISRO can provide. And so NSIL becomes the commercial arm of ISRO and to an extent. So what is going to happen eventually is that India, even today, has 3 space programs. The oldest of the lot is the civilian space program, primarily run by ISRO. And in the past years and decades, ISRO has had some sort of interface with the Indian military, where they were building satellites of specifications that the military was asking them to build for. But in the near future, our commercial space players, our companies, Indian space companies, would also start providing services. They will manufacture for the demands of the defense space agents. And of course, they'll also collaborate with the civilian space. So what's happening right now is we are in the infancy of the creation of India's military-civil fusion, where the civilian space program, the military space program, and the commercial space program are partners of each other. And together this trio becomes the Indian space program. So Indian space program is growing leaps and bounds in terms of mandate, in terms of activities, and in terms of what it is going to achieve for India in the coming years. So what should be India's positioning in international interplanetary plans? When I say interplanetary in the title of this talk, there is a global concerted effort that by the year 2040 or by the decade of 2040s, humans could reach Mars. And to reach Mars, you will need a globally exhaustive space ecosystem, because you'll need a number of technologies to take humans to Mars. The technologies will consist of material sciences, biological sciences, your communication systems, life support systems, materials, specialty chemicals, whatnot. There's so many industries that will be involved directly and indirectly for taking humans to Mars. That means humans to Mars, that entire project is one hell of an industry. We need to be part of that, and we need to grow in that aspect.
I wanted to understand how can there be synergetic relationship between the academy and the government or the private institutions to bring out the IP potential from universities in this space to commercialization. If you see any other ways of that synergetic relationship between from academia to the industry, if you can shed some light on that.
No, one with no definite answer. There can be multiple solutions to it. Every private academic institution or public academic institution will have its own way of dealing with this topic. And again, it will also depend on the will of the leadership, institutional leadership, about what sort of change do they want to bring. Like, for instance, if you see the IIT Madras Research Park, now they've decided onto themselves that they will take the lead for space startups in India, especially at the academia industry interface. And they've done that. Now you have so many space startups coming out of that research park. So they've chosen that technology. You have IIT Bombay again. It may not have chosen it, but you've had in the past some startups or nascent startups. Some of them are now associated with JanyuTech. Part of it. So what will happen eventually is, what sort of incubators are you going to create is something that will matter. You need some basic infrastructure for these space startups, and space startups need distinct infrastructure. They can't have the same setup that laboratory. So that needs to be done. Secondly, you have these regional space centers in various universities. So in Pune, you have the regional space cell, ISRO space cell. You have some space cell in IIC Bangalore. They need to be activated. They have been working very leisurely on basic sciences of space. Let them continue with that. There's no problem in that. But you should put an emphasis on them to create some applied science output. They can take it to a certain TRL level, but then after that, you need to have an incubator which converts that technology readiness level to commercial readiness. You need a lot of things to happen. Then you have this space technology incubation centers that have come up recently. ISRO STICs in various regions of India. So from Rourkela in Orissa, you have one in Jammu, Central University of Jammu. Then you have some in Uttar Pradesh, Shillong, you have one. They need to become regional centers of space incubation. So for something in Northeast, STIC in Northeast should be a magnet for all the space innovations coming out of North. 7 sister states, something like that. The one in Rourkela should be a magnet for all the space startups coming from Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, that sort of thing, Orissa, those states. So you need to have that sort of approach eventually. ISRO has done whatever it can. And many a times what happens is, there are things which we want ISRO to do for us, but these are out of ISRO's mandate. As the Americans call it, they're out of their paychecks. So we need to make sure that there is an ecosystem around them which lets that happen, which takes care of these sort of expectations. So then it becomes a win-win. And I'm pretty sure after the space reforms, these sort of things will happen.
You had mentioned the good part of it, that the number of satellites and the whole traffic is going to grow up, and we do need to gear up for it. One is, I would like to really understand your detailed views on companies like SpaceX and OneWeb and their constellation plans. Because SpaceX, I think, has applied for more than 36,000 satellite. In the ITU, they have applied for more than 36,000 satellites or something like that. And given that so far, at least we understand, as far as we understood, space has been, it's kind of a first come first serve kind of a industry with respect to the licenses, etc. So, when we have the companies like SpaceX and the others essentially blocking the future path, how exactly do we, per se, from a company like from India, how do we really protect this environment or this forte for the companies which are coming up? I'm not just talking about India, but essentially many other developing countries as well. So this is one part of it. It's essentially, how do we protect ourselves? Number one. Number two, the way SpaceX, the Starlink constellation or the OneWeb constellations, the way they have been regenerated over and over again, every 3 years also, you kind of give rebirth to the organization. There's a change of management or ownership, or this is the trend what we are seeing in at least some, not Starlink, of course, but the others. So these are the 2 points. If you could throw some light on these.
Thank you, Sayaman. We are talking to each other after meeting at the Bangalore airport 2 months ago. So nice to meet you again over here. So I'll give you my frank opinions on SpaceX. So very frank. Not a big fan of SpaceX, although they are doing very well for themselves. But why do I say that? Let me start by saying that, look, whenever you stand at any Indian railway station or maybe on a roadside, you'll always find plastic littered around. Okay, you'll cuss the municipal corporation, you'll cuss the Jilla Parishad or whatever you are, you'll cuss them that ye dhang se kaam nahi karte. Lekin we don't cuss the Western model of economy for doing this to us. So look at the old paintings. Amrish is again also a very great connoisseur of history. Not many people know that, but those who have seen his videos, they know that very well. आप पुराने जमाने के कुछ पेंटिंग्स देखिए, पुराने जमाने के, maybe from Bhagyanagar area or from the Maratha Empire or old Delhi paintings. What do you see? Squeaky clean. Yeah, even the British era paintings and photographs of old Mumbai के पुराने जो local stations थे, railway stations थे, they were all squeaky clean. क्यों? Plastic नहीं था ना. Plastic जब बनाया, the only focus was utility. The only focus was profits. Same is the case with SpaceX. The focus right now is only utility, immediate utility, and immediate profits. Long term में, it is not sustainable at all. Because, like Prithvi said, we need to go out in outer space hand in hand. Let no person or let no profession be left off. There are issues coming up about large constellations from various scientific communities. One of the community is astronomy, ground-based astronomy. What are they saying? So ground-based astronomers who also deal with a lot of sophisticated space science. So astronomy is sophisticated. You need a really world-class precision instrumentation for that. What do they say? That we are getting tremendous interferences because of constellations in the LEO. That hasn't been the problem until now, but this menace is growing. And what that would eventually do is, it will become a major hindrance for astronomical observation. Now, is astronomy a leisure activity? No, it's a very serious profession. And we need to care of that profession as well. So this is the community of astronomers which is raising voice against big constellation. Another community is that of atmospheric scientists. Atmospheric scientists are saying that if you have so many satellites in the LEO, and when you have to deorbit it at the end of life, when you deorbit it, most of the heavy metals, especially aluminium, gets deposited into the upper atmosphere. Now, are we happy depositing heavy metals and aluminium in the upper atmosphere? Is it a natural part of the upper atmosphere? No. And that's the reason why this constellation and the promise that it comes up with, although it makes sense in immediate terms, in longer terms, it is going to create adverse problems. You don't really want aluminium in the atmosphere. You are troubled with CO2 in the atmosphere. Amrish just mentioned about carbon dioxide sequestration, but you don't want to create a scenario where you'll have to sequester aluminium from the upper atmosphere. Although it may be a lucrative business for the sequesterers, but you don't want to get there. No, you know what I get. So there are companies like there is a Japanese company, there is a European company which is saying that, okay, let's build satellites made out of wood. But wood ke satellites, are they going to resist space weather events? Are they going to resist GCR events, galactic cosmic ray events? No. So how are they going to survive? The survivability in the space is difficult. So what is the end result? Where are we coming to? The only solution to do this is have a cap on the number of satellites that a constellation can have. You can't have 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 satellites in the LEO. No, not at all. Because eventually, if it starts creating debris, none of your active debris removal technologies will be able to mitigate that issue, because the debris landscape will actually cover a huge area. Even today, when we talk about, I'll give you an example of plastic debris in the oceans. There is a great garbage patch in the Pacific. There is a great garbage patch in the Indian and the Atlantic Ocean. Which of the private sector companies have come to the fore to collect that plastic patch in the oceans? None. There's no single private company today which is ready to retrieve that plastic and make good use of it. There are a couple of non-profit associations. One is based out of Netherlands from TU Delft University, and one is an American association which is right now collecting garbage patches from the world's ocean. तो अगर ocean का ही आप garbage patch निकालने के लिए आपका private sector तैयार नहीं है, वो क्या तैयार होने वाला है? It is again a challenging environment. So ADR and all that, these technologies, they may seem really good, and many a times, innovators, I've been one, have this habit of, hard selling their innovation and hard selling their technology. But when it comes to real life execution, real world execution, things become really difficult. So before we land up into a ditch, let's make sure that the number of constellations के ऊपर एक cap बैठ जाए. And for that, India can play a very big role, because you don't have that many constellations. You are standing on a morally high pedestal. Use that position of strength to dictate terms to the Chinese and the Americans. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.